What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 253 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about yet one more Weird Western book. This one is called Dead West. This is by Rick Spears and Rob G. This is a zombie western, for lack of a better labeling. Basically, this story starts with a Native American tribe that gets massacred by a group of white guys. There's one survivor. Like 8 years later, I think at one point, the survivor, he says that it's been 8 years. He comes to this little town that was built on what was his tribe, and then he starts this big zombie apocalypse in this little town. And then we have these two guys. They ride into town. One of them is a bounty hunter chasing the other one, and then they both get caught in the middle of this zombie apocalypse story. And this is a very interesting premise. I really love the premise here. Out of all of the weird Western stories that we've had, that I've talked about so far, we've had alien robots, we've had vampires, we've had werewolves, we haven't had zombies yet. And I don't know why we don't have this as a part of the zombie genre more often. Most of the time you'll have zombies in the present day. I can't tell you how often you'll see in the present day, like, people stuck in a mall, like in Dawn of the Dead, or people stuck in a house, like Night of the Living Dead. But this is people in the Old West stuck in this little town that's been surrounded by, I guess, salt. It doesn't say, but there's a big circle of salt that surrounds this town, which resurrects all the dead. It's a neat premise. It's just enough of a twist on the zombie story that you've seen hundreds of times that it becomes interesting. Unfortunately, the premise is about the only thing about this book that I can praise. There is a lot about this book that I really didn't care for. Number one, the artwork. It's a lot like how I talked about Dead Irons yesterday, how at times it's very difficult for me to tell characters apart. One of the guys who comes to town, the bounty hunter, he looks an awful lot like the sheriff of this town. It's not until we get about 3/4 of the way through the book, actually it's a little closer to the end, where we see these two are about to face off in the street, that I'm like, okay, now I can see some differences. This one's nose is shaped a little differently. He has 5 o'clock shadow, the other one is clean shaven. But for the rest of the book, I was getting these two characters confused, especially early on when we see one of them, he is watching someone get hanged, and then later he's in a bar, and then we see the bounty hunter come to town, and for a little bit I thought they were the same character. I was a little bit confused by that. And I'm not sure if it's because the art is in black and white that it's not helping me differentiate these characters, because sometimes, although I personally don't have anything against black and white comic books, sometimes having a comic be in color can help you differentiate characters quite a bit. You can give one character blonde hair and one character red hair, and otherwise you could make them look exactly the same, but then if it's in color, you're telling your audience with these subtle little hints, okay, this character's different from that character. But if it's in black and white, you have to try harder to make all of your characters look different. And I feel like this book, at times, wasn't doing that. There were some characters here who I felt like looked a little too similar. Also, it was like over halfway into the book before I realized that there were actually two different camps of people in this town. There were people barricaded in one building on one side of the road, and then there were people barricaded in another building on the other side of the road. It was a good little ways into the book before I realized that. And again, I feel like that could have been made a little bit more clear if the book had just slowed down a little bit and told us that. Because there's this one guy, he's looking for the other guy, who we only ever hear him called Fat Man, and the Fat Man, he came into town, and then he's like asking for help, and then the next thing we know, we see the bounty hunter, and we don't know where the Fat Man is, and I was thinking, okay, the Fat Man left, and now we're going to be following the bounty hunter as he's stuck in town with all these zombies. But then, a good little bit later, we see that the Fat Man is actually on the other side of the road with these other people also barricaded in another building, and I feel like that could have been conveyed to us a little sooner than what it was. Also, this book does something that I'm 100% sure was intentional, but it made it a little bit difficult for me to follow anyway. I don't think any of the characters in this book were actually given a name. Whenever we get to the town where all of the action is happening, people are only called Bounty Hunter or Fat Man or, pardon my language, Whore. There's a character here who I'm assuming is actually a prostitute, so people call her Whore, but people don't actually call each other by their names. And for the most part, I'm able to keep up with all these characters. You have one woman, she's blonde, the Whore, again, pardon my language, she's got darker hair, and then you got the bounty hunter, he wears a poncho and has a beard, the Fat Man, he's fat, obviously. So for the most part, it's easy for me to keep up with all these characters, except for when I said already when characters look very similar. But I think it would have been a little better if we could have slowed this book down a little bit, maybe add another 20 to 40 pages of story to this book, and we could have gotten to know these characters as characters instead of them just being stock archetypes who exist in just about every Western that you've seen. I don't want to read this just because it's an interesting twist on the zombie genre. I want to read about interesting characters that I can engage with who happen to exist in an interesting story. The story idea is interesting, but the characters are not. And I'm pretty sure that that was intentional. I'm pretty sure that they knew what they were doing when they didn't give any of these characters names. But I really do wish that we could have slowed down a little bit, made the story a little bit longer, and gotten to know some of these characters a little bit before the zombie apocalypse stuff starts happening. Because when the bounty hunter chases the fat man into town, the zombie apocalypse thing has already been going on for like a week. And I was a little surprised by that. I was thinking that we were going to get to see the beginning of it in this little town. But as you can see, the story is not very long. I think it could have been a little bit longer, and we could have gotten to know these characters a little bit. I think I would have liked the story a little bit more if they had done that, but I'm pretty sure that was a deliberate choice on their part. Overall, I don't hate this story as much as Dead Irons that I talked about yesterday, and really, I didn't hate Dead Irons, I just didn't like it at all. I like some things about the Dead West, but I do think this could have been a little bit better. But overall, I would say if you're interested in seeing a twist on the zombie genre story, if you're sick and tired of zombie stories that take place in the present day, this one I think is interesting enough that it warrants your attention if you are a fan of the zombie genre. But bear in mind, there are some things about it that are probably going to be problematic for you if you're looking at it like I was looking at it. So those are my thoughts on the Dead West. I hope that you guys liked this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.